developed a network to serve ourselves, but we also allowed that network to be used by government entities and other, basically government entities and schools throughout the region, so that they would then have increased access to broadband. And that has now developed into basically 5 or 6 different networks that we've been involved in, excuse me, and helped develop. And the 2 most critical, I guess, recently have been 2 broadband technology opportunity programs that the university's been involved in the region. The data project in DeKalb County. DeKalb County got a round 1 project to develop a network within the county, and then in round 2 there was a broadband technology opportunity partnership program that encompasses the 9 counties of Northwest Illinois. So when you think about that, we've got the universities involved in programs, projects, infrastructure projects that really result in serving 10 counties in Northwest Illinois, and including communities of 100 and 200 all the way up to communities of 140,000. So it's quite a network and quite a differentiated area that we're trying to work with. As part of understanding that, and the primary role of our network, the initial primary role of our network is to serve community anchor institutions, which is really kind of the primary purpose of the Broadband Technology Opportunity Partnership, with a secondary purpose from our perspective of being able to develop an infrastructure that can be leveraged by others to serve households and businesses and non-community anchor institutions throughout the region. And just a side note, community anchor institutions typically are government, libraries, schools, basically your public sector organizations. So as part of understanding that, with the support of Partnership for Connected Illinois, we ended up doing a survey of community anchor institutions in the 10 counties in Northwest Illinois. Now, unlike the internet survey that was done by SNG, or the telephone survey that was done that John referred to, we actually did a mail survey for a variety of reasons. And I think probably the biggest of which is we're trying to get information from not only those who were using technology, but those who weren't using technology. And so we thought that a good mail survey might be the best way to go. And to accomplish that, we commissioned Columbia Technology Company, CTC, out of Virginia to actually conduct this survey for us. And we surveyed I think about 1,100 community anchor institutions in Northwest Illinois. Some of which, about 800 or so of those, we had conversations with, or at least knew about, the Broadband Technology Partnership programs in Northwest Illinois, and another 300 or 400 that had not necessarily known about them. Interestingly enough, from a mail survey, if you're familiar with survey research, for those who had some knowledge, or those organizations that had some knowledge of what the Broadband Technology Opportunity Partnership Program was, we got about a 21% survey response for a mail survey. So, if you're thinking about, that's a really good response rate from a mail survey. For those that we did not know whether they had knowledge of this or not, we got a 9% response rate. So you can see the difference in terms of doing these surveys of the importance of awareness of the people you're trying to survey. Not that you're trying to sway their view, but just the fact that the response rate increases if they know why you're trying to collect the data. And I think our survey points that out. And we actually segmented the market, if you will, into 4 different, of the 10 counties, we segmented them into 4 different markets. And simply, ask them the normal things. How are you using it? What type of connectivity do you currently have? How would you plan on using it? Interestingly enough, of the, I think, 170 or so responses we got, 100% of those that responded currently have internet access. currently have some type of broadband access. That ranges a lot. Some of them had DSL. A good portion had cable, and a few had leased lines, and a few had actual fiber. The most important, when we asked them the most important characteristic of a broadband provider, they indicated that uptime or lack of downtime was the most important characteristic that they were looking for. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 30% of those responding had downtime at least every month, and 5% indicated that they had downtime on a daily basis. So that was a huge, in terms of looking at how we as an organization can provide better service, trying to reduce that downtime and trying to provide better service is something that we're taking into consideration. And I think fiber has the ability to do that probably better than other modes of broadband connectivity. When we put this network together, just as a side note, we are putting the network together as a 100-bit or a gigabit connectivity to every community anchor institution. So we chose not to do the tiered layer and get 10 megabits here and 20 there and 100 there and 500 there. So all of our community anchor institutions will have a gigabit connectivity. Interestingly enough, though, that has presented some interesting market challenges because if you're providing a gigabit connectivity to everybody, there's a cost of doing that. And some are not willing to pay the marginal cost to get from 20 to 100 to a gig. And so we've had some interesting market challenges in connecting the community anchor institutions, especially where they're paying, 10 or 15 or $20 a month currently for a cable connection, and then we're asking hundreds of dollars for a gigabit connection, and they're coming back and saying it's not that important to us. We don't think we're well served with our 20 megabit connection. So one of the things we realized in a hurry is that there's a really education job out there to do. People, I don't think, realize what they can do with broader bandwidth, and so we've started putting together education programs and doing news releases and talking about how the internet can be used. We asked the community anchor institutions of how satisfied they were with their existing internet provider, and we actually asked that on a variety of levels: security, reliability, customer service, and so forth. And in reality, if you go on a 1 to 5 scale, depends on how you look at it. On average, nobody got above a 4 on that 5-point scale on any of the satisfaction aspects of service. And the lowest score was on connection speed, which is kind of what we'd hope for, but you never know until you know. But there was a score on 3.3 out of 5 on connection speed. But again, all the scores were less than 4 on a 5-point scale. And the biggest gap really was on speed and reliability. The gap between satisfaction and importance was the greatest on reliability, and the second was on speed. So I think one of the things we learned from this survey is that to have a network to attract customers, to make sure that we're providing a service that they're willing to pay for, we do need to make sure that we provide them speed in excess of what they have today. And we also need to make sure that we provide them a good level of service and a minimum amount of downtime. If you take a look at how they are currently using it, the major uses are, interestingly enough, downloading video. So when you take a look at how they're using it to download video, and everything all the way down to using it for e-commerce and so forth. I think as I look at this, one of the things we were trying to do is to say, as we develop this network, what do we need to be doing to provide service? And I think the survey results kind of helped us out there. But the other thing I wanted to just spend a couple minutes on, and I'm making a segue here that may not be real smooth, but the other is what are we doing or what can be done to, or how can these VTOP projects help the community as a whole, beyond the community anchor institutions? What can we be doing in order to help businesses and households? The approach that we're taking with our projects is really to looking for and developing joint ventures and partnerships with other private sector organizations, whether it be a local ISP, whether it be an incumbent telephone company or whatever. The idea that we have an infrastructure, if you will, that has been subsidized by the federal government. Can we make that infrastructure available at a cost less than it would cost the incumbents to build it, and therefore reduce their cost in delivering services to small rural communities? And we're in the process now of talking to several incumbents about doing, ISPs and incumbents about doing two things. One, provide service to our CIs, because we are not in the service business, we are in the mid-mile backbone business. And so those customers are going to want services, whether it be bandwidth or data storage or whatever. They're going to want those services.
So Urbana-Champaign Big Broadband, which we affectionately call UC2B, it is a comprehensive community infrastructure that was funded through the VTOP initiatives, and it is built on that fiber optic network that we've all been talking about. It reaches connections up to 100 times typical internet speeds, and in this particular project, it directly links households, businesses, and community anchor institutions to today's fastest technologies. There are some unique characteristics about UC2B in that it is one of the only communities in the U.S. through VTOP to receive both middle mile and last mile infrastructure. And what that does is allow us to connect fiber directly to the home and fiber to the premise. We specifically look to target underserved areas in that if we're tackling the digital divide, we have to go to the source that is a lot further away on that spectrum. And we also include a concept with our community anchors of ensuring that no matter where they are within the city of Champaign or the county of Champaign, that they will be connected to this fiber optic network, so that simply because they serve the communities that we're looking to target through their social service programs and things like that. So libraries, schools, churches, government and municipal entities, those are all included on this network no matter where they are. And I say that because with this particular project, we specifically looked at 11 census block groups, and so those that are being served by UC2B specifically is a very small segment of the larger Champaign and Urbana communities. We also took a very data-driven approach. We wanted to make sure that we assessed our area of study, really understood what were the barriers to broadband adoption, because we want to, in the end, provide a service that addresses that need. The UC2B project is overseen by an intergovernmental consortium. Essentially, that includes the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and both the City of Champaign and the City of Urbana. They function to make policy decisions around the project and its direction, build and manage the infrastructure itself. We are charged with competing with private companies now as well. We look to serve the underserved, provide customer service at the same or better level of private companies, and also ensure that we serve the customer the right way, because that's the most important once we get this technology to them. We have several goals with the project, and one of our primary goals was ensuring that it embodied a community planning process. And what that really meant was, bringing on ambassador teams that were from the community, that were already vested and knew the space that we were working in, that we were able to collaborate with organizations and local leaders so that we increased awareness around broadband, but also we're able to just leverage and work with strategic partners in this initiative. We use several public forums and technology demonstration events to address the digital divide. And also we're able to bring on volunteers that are involved even still today that joined us in 2009. Another big piece is really building digital inclusive communities, which we're all looking to do, helping people meet their human development needs, and also determining the best practices to inform policy. The UC2B model is essentially surrounding three things. It's research-based, data-driven, and built on community participation. So we wanted to examine large-scale projects that we could use as a marker for our own, a basis for our own. Being that it is a unique project, we do have to rely on somewhat of a learn-as-you-go philosophy as well that will inform futures in this arena. We've looked to, in the data-driven component, deploy canvassing teams that would essentially go door to door and communicate directly with stakeholders, users, and potential adopters. The community participation required engagement at all levels, and we looked at community and government sources to do that. We wanted to understand our constituencies directly, so that meant talking with them directly, and then taking that information to provide the best service possible. Our model essentially, especially looking at our research at a household level, if you are or are not familiar with the user acceptance model, as it relates to the National Broadband Plan, it essentially identifies and looks to move toward a unified theory of how and why people will or won't adopt technology. So what we have seen is relevance. You know, how can I use this on a daily basis? Does this really affect my everyday well-being? Price, usability, as well as access as being some key factors in that. Place matters. We've talked about it and heard from others this morning as well that your geographical location and the resources that you have access to, the awareness that you really have around broadband, it really does make a difference. So stakeholder alignment, really bringing together community anchors.
It was conducted over the course of 2011 and half of 2012. Our evaluation objectives mostly involved trying to understand what it takes to get low-income seniors, people who live in public housing, to adopt the internet. This is the very middle of the digital divide. The project was conducted by Connected Living. It's a private corporation. They were the grant recipient of the SBA money. The program was implemented in 23 buildings, public housing, low-income buildings that house seniors across the northern part of Illinois. A very nice collection of diverse settings: rural, urban, high-rise, smaller buildings, different types of communities. We were funded by Don Samuelson, DSSA. The evaluation was. Of course, this is a mixed methods evaluation. What I'm going to do today is present the results from basic pre-post single group research design. It doesn't bear the same weight as a randomization or other types of designs, but it is a program evaluation. We were evaluating an intervention that needed to and did change while we were watching it. So it's not the type of tight control that you would see in research proper. The program is composed of an intervention that Connected Living developed to train elders to use computers. It has 7 steps. The first is awareness raising. What happened was they hired what they would call program deliverers or community program managers to work in each of the 23 buildings to build awareness. They hosted a number of events, poster blitzes, worked with social networks in the buildings to recruit seniors into the program, into the training program. Then once indication of interest was made, they assessed the beginning skills and capabilities of each resident individually. This is a very, very, what I would describe sort of in a social science perspective as intensive outreach. Each resident chose to participate in the program, had their skills assessed. There was discussions with them about what their particular interests were, with the idea of overcoming barriers of relevance to computer use. Here to the next here. Then took place what originally started as a 12-week training session in a computer learning center in lab with community program manager doing the intervention. It was a manualized 3-level beginner, intermediate, and advanced level training. It involved hands-on computer use and peer support in small group settings, hour at a time, classes over the span of 12 weeks. That was eventually modified because the scheduling became difficult for people. It wasn't convenient, but it was based on a 12-week training program. Then at the end of it, there was a test. Essentially, it wasn't a written test, and it was given variously, but it was a skills assessment that led to what we sort of informally call an internet driver's license. The elders had to be able to show a certain number of skills, and then they were eligible for a subsidized free computer that was eventually accessed by wireless in each of the 23 buildings. So once training was completed and skills were assessed, the people participating in the program got a computer that they could use in their individual apartments where they lived. Toward the end of the program, the community program managers met with the seniors and developed what they call a personalized internet use plan, and sought to more fully understand individual preferences and interests about internet use, especially those that materialized after training. Then there was an attempt by what I would call activity programming to integrate internet use into daily life. Connected Living held in each building discussion group meetings where they might, for example, have a theme of Amelia Earhart and of the era. There were many people in the building who lived in the era where she would have been in the news, and they would show YouTube videos, information on the web. Was the whole discussion group centered around internet resources of things that were of interest to people who were in the program. Then now we move on to evaluation findings. I can describe them quite quickly. We found that the mode of communication that elders had with friends, relatives, and with each other changed quite significantly. We saw very significant increases in the number of people who communicated with friends and relatives online, of course. The very most popular things that were that elders engaged in, my guess would be Facebook. Connected Living had a private social networking site. So we saw telephone use, snail mail go down, and internet contacts, even internet phone in some instances, go way up, change from the beginning of the program to the end. We saw the same thing with relatives and peers. I think what's of most social science significance that we discovered is we used something called, we used a social networking scale and did a pre-post measure of the degree of interaction, the quality of interaction, the number of interactions, summed into a scale that was psychometrically valid. And we saw a very significant increase in social interactions between the beginning of the study and the end. So what we saw was social engagement along a number of different dimensions increased greatly when internet use went up. I have here data on particular, it may have been too much to show really, particular skill changes. We had effect changes from 2% to 20%, starting with turning on a computer, which was a very minor skill, all the way up to attaching documents, using internet telephone, chatting online, all the aspects of using email and social networking sites. Our average effect size was about 12% increase from baseline, statistically significant. Almost all of them were significant. We discovered that, not actually to our surprise after we thought about it, but the elders had a great a reserve of computer skills, but they weren't relevant. They had previous experience using a computer or a little bit of experience, and so we didn't see very large changes in simple skills. Just mousing, for example, or pointing and clicking, moving scroll bars. We saw very significant increases in some of the more advanced skills, like attaching a photograph to an email. Those changed very dramatically, and we discovered that most seniors had some experience using computers and some access, but it turned out to not be relevant. We asked questions: did you have a computer? Yes. Does it work? No. So lots of sort of preliminary or cursory experience, maybe a little interest in computer use, but not a lot of sophisticated practical use of computers. So we didn't go from zero, never turned on a computer before, to high levels of skill. We went from, I've seen one, my grandchild has one, I played with one in the library, or maybe had one on the job 7 years ago, and they have no relevant computer skills and no practical ability to use and access the internet. So the program had quite a significant impact on what I would call current and relevant use of medium to moderately high skilled computer and internet activities. Some of the most important findings of the study, we've discovered that about 50% of building residents enrolled in the program, and once we looked at the successive waves of the training, what happened was they started the program in each building, and they had training sessions, and they repeated. Some of them had up to 4 or 5 sessions, 12-week sessions or something equivalent to that for the life of the program. Some people dropped out of the first wave, but many people finally picked up in the second or third wave. We wound up with about somewhere in the 70 to 80% range of people who started finished, but 50% finished a single session. So they eventually finished later sessions. Connected Living changed some of their policies, for example, on whether if you took a few classes in one session and quit, did you have to start over again in the next session? And when they relaxed those, instead you can start back where you left off, many more people picked up. So about approximately 3,000 people that lived in the buildings. In the end, about 1,400 people successfully completed the program, and about 1,370 received a free or refurbished computer, and most of those people were actively using subsidized broadband inside the building at the time of the end of the evaluation. So the attrition rate, I don't have the exact figures here, was somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20% of people who expressed interest and started. They never finished or had a skill attainment that was enough to achieve an internet driver's license. Some of the big things I think, from a research perspective, that we discovered is that the smaller buildings had a higher success rate. And I think what's important, and Karen mentioned this earlier, is there's a very significant group effect that occurs with internet skills, use, and interest. We were interested to know how somebody could use computers before and after training, but the relationship between the skill changes and the actual training probably wasn't as significant as it was the culture that was established in the buildings. So smaller buildings with fewer pupils per teacher tended to do better. Larger buildings with more pupils per teacher and less significant group effects didn't do as well. So we saw, for example, 53% of small building residents graduated, 51% of moderate-sized building residents graduated, and 48% of large buildings eventually enrolled and graduated. The skill improvements with more complicated tasks were more significant, almost certainly due to the fact that most had at least basic familiarity with computers, and most residents who finished the program took advantage of the free broadband. And of the people who took advantage of the free broadband, when we talked to them at the very end of the study or of the evaluation, in the 90% range of the people were actively using the computer